Now imagine in Lord of the Rings, if Sauron had actually captured the Shire, this is what it would have looked like.
Possibly.
Soon afterwards. Or it's kind of like the Castle of the Unfriendly Giant.
It could be. I think it's maybe, someone said it's what happens to typewriters when they go to hell.
When they rub too much powder on its nips.
Possibly.
Yes.
I think maybe it's when typewriters, the idea, maybe if you left your typewriter overnight by itself, this is what it would come up with under its own devices.
That's right. It's like a million typewriters would eventually like make a monkey or something something William S. Burroughs-esque like that.
Exactly. The million typewriters typing on a million monkeys typing on a million typewriters will eventually produce the best novel ever made.
Or a million stone monkeys on some with some black clay.
I like to think they'll all be wearing sweater sets as well.
And varsity sweaters. Why am I seeing varsity sweaters on these monkeys?
I think it's more kind of like the 1960s Mad Men, just an office like that, except instead of beautiful secretaries, we have just monkeys typing.
It's not just a paperweight; it's a paper burden.
Yes.
Okay. I'm here with Sam Mogelonsky. Thank you. Who is taking part in the Toronto Outdoor Art Exhibit, and this is one of my favorite pieces so far of the exhibit, and this is why it's art to see at the fair. And how are you finding the experience so far? This is your first time here, right?
It is my first time here. Everyone's been really lovely and very friendly and very helpful if you need a hand. Yesterday was quite the day. We had the torrential downpour in the morning, which was quite something to set up with. I'm really lucky that I have a very supportive brother and mom who helped me carry my stuff in through the rain.
Really? Because my brother and my sister and dad are all very supportive and trying to get me to have a real job. But
well, not every day. But some days you can be an artist and have supportive parents.
Okay, yes, true.
So they helped me out, and it gave me some time in the morning to set up, and then it kind of fined up in the afternoon. It was a lovely afternoon, and I think it's cooled off a bit compared to the sweltering, almost 40 degrees we had last week, and hopefully people will come down and just check out the show.
That's a very important part of Canadian culture, by the way, is talking about the weather. I mean, you can be an art show, you can talk about the weather, you can be, at the G20, you can be talking about the weather.
Well, it's pretty important. I mean, actually the weather was a big factor in making these.
Because,
these were reconstructed. I originally made this piece in London, UK. I was doing a residency at the Florence Trust, which is just in North London. And I originally made this piece there, and then I had to bring it back, but to bring it back, I had to take it apart. So then I actually remade this piece for a different exhibition I was in, which was the Artist Project down at the exhibition place. It was, I think, like February time. And because I had to remake it, I was remaking it in the winter, which poses a whole lot of other problems. So there were problems with making this, and that it was snowing and very, very cold, and I was working in my garage with, winter gloves with a layer of latex gloves over top of them, and trying to work with this foam that isn't really supposed to set in anything below, room temperature.
Yeah.
And kind of running outside whenever it wasn't snowing to spray paint them. So there's a whole, working in Canada does pose a whole other layer onto artistic production, I think, and I think so much of perhaps what you would see here or within any Canadian gallery of a Canadian artist is really a reflection of where we come from, and how as a country, where we're geographically located, with our relationship with the rest of the world, just how we see the world and how that influences artistic work coming out of Canada.
Oh, you're right. It's a very technical aesthetic consideration that, I've let paintings set outside when it's very cold. Things happen to them.
Exactly.
And people don't realize just how sweltering hot it gets in the summer and just how freezing cold it gets in the winter. And when you have work in that kind of extremes, and usually in a pretty crappy studio space, then you're going to get some really interesting effects.
It's true, and I think that because we're Canadian and we do have this attitude of, we're just going to, it might be snowing, it might be warm, but we're just going to go out and do what it is that we do. That I think that's what shows in art practice, that people just have something they want to do, and they're not going to let the weather or money or the amount that they have to drive to get there get in the way of it. And I think that says a lot about Canadians, and especially Canadian artists.
Cool. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your process and the a little bit about these wonderful sort of dark fantasy works?
Well, The base of them is all all found typewriters. Some are older than others. Some are a little bit newer. But I love the typewriter as an object, especially now. I think it's such a romantic, nostalgic object. I mean, the iPad coming out and computer culture and everything we have is just right at our fingertips. And I just remember being a kid and my grandfather had a big old typewriter and I used to just play with it. And just how much fun it was to have that really tangible connection to what you're writing. And just kind of hearing the keys clatter and the ring, the ding when it gets to the end of the page. And I find that really interesting. And so to start with these, I had this idea of sort of a romantic notion of the writer at their typewriter is sitting at their typewriter in a kind of dark room in the south of France, and they have a bottle of wine and a cigarette, and they're going to sit there and they're going to make this story. So I started with that in mind, and then these just kind of evolved out of that, thinking about storytelling and the elements that make up these stories that were read as children that sort of become ingrained in us and sort of in a way shape how we see the world. And thinking about these elements that you find in every story, the kind of beautiful flowers and how those are sort of elements of beauty and seduction, like you've got Sleeping Beauty and they leave the flower on the coffin, and kind of how these things are used, and like castles. And then I started thinking more about, say, we've got like lighthouses and something to look over all these things. And then the idea came from looking at ideas of sort of islands. And if you could separate out all these stories into their own individual islands, and then somehow be able to get in a boat and make up your own adventure. So you could live on one, and then you want to go play in a castle, and you get in your boat, whether it's a sailboat or a pirate ship or a submarine, and you go and you play in a castle for a day.
It has a very Oriental prince, kind of like those islands, kind of feel to them. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine clouds going, around these.
That'd be great.
Yeah, with the Monkey King and.
Maybe someday.
It's kind of like my grandfather had a typewriter as well, but it was the I-type, so it was better. But he couldn't. They had to send it back to the company to get the ribbon replaced.
I think so. I'm not sure whether these would actually work. I mean, they obviously won't work now. But yeah, and the material of them is all stuff you can get at Home Depot or your local craft store, which is something I like to play with. This idea that you can take a material and completely invert what it's supposed to be used for.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's something to be said about, when you go to an art gallery and as an artist, if someone says, this piece is made of oil, or this is made of resin, this is made of fiberglass, I understand that process. It's not foreign to me, but I think to the viewer, and especially the viewer that's going to be at this show, that is a really foreign process.
Yeah.
So saying, oh yeah, this is made of insulation foam. I think that kind of puts a nice little twist on it.
He romanticizes it in a way.
Yeah, definitely. But so the sort of parts that look like the island themselves, almost rock face, is insulation foam. The stuff you would use, it's called Great Stuff from Home Depot.
Right.
And when it comes out of the can, it's really sticky and awful. And as I said before, I was working in the winter, so it was drying and setting at really weird times. And then it's all carved. All the little stairs are carved out. You can actually do that with just an X-Acto knife. Because once it sets, it's just really like styrofoam. And then all these little pieces, the trees, the roses, the houses, the boats, those are all made from, don't forget the shark, in case you fall in.
Yeah.
Those are all made from Fimo, which is kind of a children's craft material. A lot of people use it when they make beads. You bake it in your oven at home. And obviously there's a few like structural elements. I'm using some things on the inside to make sure they don't collapse, because the material is exactly that. It's meant for beads. It's not really meant to do anything else.
We have about 10 seconds.
Yep.
I need to ask you one question.
Yep.
Do you think this will go well above my couch?
I'm not entirely sure. Possibly on a really sweet coffee table.
Yes, it would. I think this is probably the best art that will not sell. This entire fair.
You're probably right.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks very much.